It is a quiet morning in an Australian suburb. The kind of morning that feels almost too peaceful. The streets are empty, the sun just beginning to peek over the horizon, and the neighborhood is still asleep. But that silence will not last, not for long. In a matter of seconds, the calm will be shattered. Police officers, armed and ready, are about to storm through the homes of criminals, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating faces frozen in terror. The peaceful morning? Gone. Replaced by the chaos of a massive international operation. What unfolds next is nothing short of extraordinary. A global crackdown on organized crime, a move so well coordinated that it spans continents, from Asia to Europe, all the way to the Americas. 16 countries, 9,000 officers, over 800 arrests, and nearly 40 tons of drugs. In the blink of an eye, entire criminal empires are exposed, crushed. But who is pulling the strings behind this unprecedented sting? And what if I told you it all started with a single phone? In the shadows of modern society, a world of criminals thrives, hidden behind the most advanced technology. Their weapon, encrypted phones. These aren't just ordinary devices. They are the secret lifeline for the criminal elite. No cameras, no GPS, no traces, just pure untraceable communication. For years, these phones kept the most dangerous criminals out of reach, giving them the confidence to operate freely, believing they were invisible to law enforcement. But that was about to change. ANØM was born, a new player in the encrypted phone market, and it would soon become the weapon of choice for criminals worldwide. Unlike its predecessors, ANØM wasn't just another tool of secrecy. It was a tool of destruction. The mastermind behind ANØM wasn't selling just privacy, he was selling the criminals their downfall. For years, devices like Phantom Secure and Sky ECC ruled the criminal world, offering ultimate security. But one by one, law enforcement shut them down, creating a massive vacuum. And that's when ANØM emerged, taking advantage of the gap. Criminals jumped at the chance to use these phones, believing they were untouchable. They were handed out freely, like an irresistible gift. But this wasn't just a giveaway, it was a trap. And as these phones began to spread, so did the confidence of the criminals. They talked freely, made deals in the open, thinking no one was listening. But someone was listening. Every conversation, every deal, every illegal move was being watched. The messages they sent, they were being intercepted. The trap had been set, and the hunters were closing in, watching their every move. The criminals didn't know it yet, but their network was already compromised. The very tool they trusted most had become their undoing. The moment they started using ANØM, they sealed their fate. In the depths of the criminal underworld, a man named AFU saw an opportunity. The downfall of encrypted phone companies had left a void, one that could be exploited. AFU wasn't just a businessman, he was a brilliant strategist, someone who understood the dark side of technology better than anyone. And in that void, he saw his chance to take control. AFU had a plan. He would build the next generation of encrypted phones, a phone so secure, so foolproof, that no one could ever break through. A phone that criminals would trust, that they would use without question, believing it would keep them safe. What they didn't know was that AFU wasn't just creating a device for their privacy. He was crafting their doom. With AFU's expertise and resources, the ANØM phone was born. At first glance, it seemed like any other phone. But hidden within its sleek design was a deadly secret, a backdoor that no one saw coming. AFU didn't just want to sell phones, he wanted to control the very communication of criminals around the world. The plan was simple: distribute the phones in the criminal world, let them spread like wildfire, and build trust. AFU knew that once the phones were in enough hands, he could track and intercept everything. Every message, every deal, every illegal transaction right at his fingertips. But the real brilliance of AFU's plan lay in its simplicity. The criminals thought they were safe, they thought they were in control. But all the while, AFU was watching, listening, and waiting. As ANØM began to grow in popularity, the criminals grew bolder. They sent messages, they made deals, and they acted with complete confidence. They thought they were untouchable. But little did they know, their every move was being silently recorded. Every transaction was being watched by the very person they trusted the most. And so, the trap was set. AFU's plan had worked. The criminals were oblivious, thinking they were operating in the shadows. But in reality, they were walking into a well-laid snare. The moment they picked up that phone, their fate was sealed. The turning point had arrived, and they had no idea what was coming next. AFU's vision was unfolding perfectly. The ANØM phones had begun to spread like wildfire through the criminal underworld. One phone at a time, trust was building, and with it, the confidence of the criminals who thought they were untouchable. As the phones changed hands, criminals felt an unshakable sense of security. They were no longer afraid of being tracked. They believed they were operating in the shadows, invisible to the prying eyes of law enforcement. But the truth was far from what they believed. AFU had built ANØM not just to serve criminals, but to trap them in a web of their own making. The phones were distributed at no cost, a perfect Trojan horse disguised as a gift, a tool for privacy. As more and more criminals got their hands on them, the scope of AFU's plan expanded. And it worked. The phones buzzed with activity as drug lords, mobsters and traffickers across the globe began to use them to conduct business, make deals and plan operations. Messages flew across the encrypted networks, all of them immune to the law's reach, or so the criminals thought. What they didn't realize was that every message they sent was being quietly intercepted. Every deal made, every shipment arranged, every hit planned, it was all being watched. The very people they trusted the most were their silent betrayers. With each new user, the trap grew tighter. AFU's collaboration with law enforcement had paid off, but it wasn't just about collecting intelligence anymore. It was about orchestrating a masterstroke. As these criminals reveled in the illusion of safety, they were unknowingly becoming the subjects of the largest sting operation in history. The plan had been set in motion. The criminals had no idea that their every move was being watched, their every word recorded. And as the phones began to spread further, their fate was already sealed. They were walking straight into a trap, and by the time they realized it, it would be too late. The moment they picked up that phone, they had signed their own sentence. Every message, every call, every deal was just another step towards their inevitable downfall. The trap was ready. The hunters were closing in, and the criminals, oblivious to the danger, had no idea what was coming next. The moment had arrived. For months, criminals had used ANØM to conduct their darkest dealings, unaware they were walking straight into a trap. What they believed was their most secure, untraceable line of communication was in reality the key to their downfall. As their trust in these phones grew, so did the trap surrounding them. Every word, every deal, every illegal action had been recorded, analyzed, and stored, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment was now. In the dead of night, across 16 countries, a storm was brewing. Police forces had coordinated a massive, worldwide operation. This wasn't just another raid. It was the final act in a long game, a carefully planned strike designed to cripple the criminal world. With tactical precision, the law enforcement teams had infiltrated the network, intercepting every message and gaining access to every hidden operation. The criminals, confident and oblivious to their surveillance, were about to face the consequences. In Australia, the first wave hit. Police stormed homes, breaking down doors, seizing criminals still asleep in their beds, their faces twisted in shock. SWAT teams flooded secret warehouses and drug labs, seizing nearly 40 tons of illegal drugs. The scent of victory was thick in the air as the authorities uncovered massive stockpiles of drugs, weapons, and millions in cash. But this was only the beginning. Across Europe and the Americas, the raids intensified. In cities and hidden locations, law enforcement arrested over 800 criminals. The drug lords, gangsters, and traffickers who had once operated in the shadows were now exposed, their empires crumbling before their eyes. Their communication, their plans, and their confidence had all been shattered, and in its place, chaos reigned. The truth was undeniable: their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. The encrypted phones, which they believed protected them from the law, had become the source of their exposure. The ANØM system, once seen as their lifeline, had led them to their doom. Every message, every secret exchange, had been silently monitored by law enforcement, who now held the key to unraveling their entire operation. For these criminals, the consequences were catastrophic. The raids were precise, swift, and relentless. From street dealers to cartel leaders, no one was spared. It was as if the world they had built had crumbled in an instant. Their entire infrastructure, once thought impenetrable, had fallen apart. And yet, even as the dust settled, one question remained: what would happen to the evidence they had collected? Was this operation truly a victory? Or would it all be undone by legal challenges, by questions of admissibility in court? As criminals were hauled away in handcuffs, the world was left to watch in awe and horror. Their empire had been brought to its knees, but the long-term effects were still unknown. The law had struck a crushing blow, but how would the legal system handle this mass of intercepted communication? Was this the final nail in the coffin for organized crime, or just another step in a much larger battle? The final raid had shattered a global network, but the story was far from over. As the criminal world grappled with its downfall, law enforcement stood victorious yet uncertain of what the future would bring. As the world watched Operation Trojan Shield unfold, the scale of the victory was clear. Over 800 criminals were arrested, 40 tons of drugs seized, and entire criminal networks were destroyed. The world seemed to cheer as law enforcement celebrated their hard-won success. But behind the triumph lay a far darker truth. The cost of this operation, the price of using ANØM to expose these criminals, was far greater than anyone had anticipated. ANØM, the encrypted phone that criminals had trusted for years, was the weapon that brought them down. These phones, once seen as untouchable, had been the lifeline for drug lords, human traffickers, and organized crime syndicates. The criminals believed they were safe, communicating securely, hidden from the prying eyes of the law. They were wrong. The phone that once provided privacy now became the tool that shattered their empire. Every message, every secret transaction, every criminal act was intercepted, recorded, and analyzed by law enforcement. The criminals had no idea their greatest asset had become their greatest enemy. But as the criminals were hauled away, a crucial question emerged: was the victory worth the price? Was it justified to breach the privacy of criminals in such an absolute way? What had been done was undeniably effective, but it raised a far more uncomfortable ethical dilemma. ANØM had been built to protect privacy, a tool for the innocent, the oppressed, the ones who needed to hide. But in the hands of law enforcement, it had been transformed into a weapon, one that undermined the very privacy it was designed to protect. In dismantling criminal empires, a line had been crossed. The operation had been a success, yes, but at what cost? The same backdoor that had been used to infiltrate the criminal world could easily be used for mass surveillance. What was done to bring these criminals down could also be used to monitor anyone: ordinary citizens, political dissidents, anyone with something to hide. The power that law enforcement now held was immense, but with it came an unsettling reality: privacy, once a fundamental right, had been sacrificed for the sake of security. The ethical question lingered: should the government be allowed to exploit such technology to combat crime, even if it meant infringing on personal freedoms? Was this victory truly worth the potential erosion of privacy? The criminals had fallen. Their networks were destroyed. The operation had dealt a blow to organized crime. But the true cost of the operation wasn't just the destruction of criminal empires. It was the growing realization that in the fight against crime, the tools of privacy could become instruments of control. As the world celebrated, the questions about the balance between security and personal freedom continued to loom. Would this victory mark the beginning of a future where privacy no longer existed? The price of ANØM was far more than anyone could have predicted. If you want to learn more about the aftermath of this operation, and the real cost of justice, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. The fight over privacy isn't over. Stay tuned for more in-depth investigations.